Hello, everyone. My name is Elia Alba. I'm one of the I am the guest curator for El Museo de Barrios La Trienal. I'm really excited tonight to be in conversation with Luis Flores, María Jose, and Dominique Duroseau tonight, where we'll be discussing representation. I think a topic that you're going to see really permeates their practice. So I want to do like a brief bio of the artist so you know a little bit who they are, and then they will be speaking a little bit about their work, and then from there we'll enter into our conversation. So Luis Flores is a multidisciplinary artist based in Los Angeles. His work ranges in medium from sculpture, installation, and video performance to painting and drawing. His work seeks to bring light to topics surrounding gender and masculinity. He has exhibited at the Hammer, Salon 94, Long Beach Museum, to name a few. Dominique Duroseau is a Newark-based artist born in Chicago, raised in Haiti. Her interdisciplinary practice explores themes of racism, social cultural issues, and existential dehumanization of Black women. She has exhibited at the Kitchen New Museum and is currently on view at the Sculpture Center in Long Island City. María Jose is a photographer and activist whose work deals with identity, gender, and race. They are currently the matriarch of the House of Grace, a trans feminist anti-racist collective with members across Puerto Rico, whose mission is to create a safe space of mutual aid, holistic healing, and artistic development for trans feminine and other non-binary individuals of color. Please welcome them. Yay. So we're going to start off with Luis talking a little bit about his work.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. My name is Luis Flores. So I'm an artist primarily making work that deals with masculinity, masculine identity, and masculine culture or masculine culture. I'm primarily known for my sculptural work, which is figurative, and I use my own body to create the different figures and put them in different sort of poses and situations. My work is primarily concerned with interrogating ideas of masculine culture, and how and why it functions the way that it does. I use a lot of my own experience and the experience of some of my close personal friends to talk about some of the problems and try to create conversation to push a new definition of masculinity, where vulnerability is something that is a place that is more commonplace within masculine culture and gatherings. Yeah, so my work is changing a lot right now. I'm delving into different forms of embroidery, and as a new father, I'm really thinking a lot about how I want to raise my kids, and thinking about my relationship to my dad and my uncles and different family and people that were influential in the way that I was raised, and think about masculinity. And so trying to sort of construct a new world where my son and daughter can just push back at these ideas, these very sort of narrow-minded ideas of how masculine and feminine need to function. So yeah, that kind of very briefly touches on some of my work and what I'm thinking about.
Thank you, Luis. Dom.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Your name. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Dominique Duroseau, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist. And the works that I'm going to be discussing predominantly here is Mammy Was Here, Dirty Detox Bare Minerals. And this series is actually a series of self-portraiture that really started off like Mammy Was Here, started off as like a series of collages, and that was focusing on Black women that were like, you know, unseen and sort of like forgotten, unknown. And it then sort of like take a turn and focus on my personal sort of like, you know, story, and sort of breaking down and interrogating aspects of like power, establishing one's like sense of pleasure, eroticism, post-trauma, especially with someone with a body that has been desexualized, really thinking about Black visibility and invisibility at the same time, and sort of like thinking about when we think about trauma, we think about wounds. Most of it tends to be like seen as a physical thing, but a lot of it can be like these invisible scars, and sort of thinking about what is mental wellness in this time. How do we really think about aspects of navigating, especially when you're trying to understand how to battle victimization and coping as a survivor, on top of everything else, dealing with like micro gestures, micro moments in like, you know, being unseen and also degraded in society, and really kind of like looking at the big Black body and sort of like thinking about that, and thinking about these complex issues along with like, you know, racism and supremacy, but then also like issues of being a Black woman, me being a big Black woman, thinking about what femininity is, and like, you know, these very enveloped things that just like come together, like, you know, race, sex, shame, assault, fear, identity, healing, and like body image, but all of it comes into a package of vulnerability and power. And what does that look like? And kind of like, you know, putting yourself in a space when you're alone, and kind of like investigating this and taking it apart, almost like this sort of like, you know, mirror therapy in some ways, where you're investigating yourself first and foremost. And if others kind of like can relate to this, what does that even look like in terms of them looking at something very abstract, which is super personal, and then sort of like radiate from that point. And then we'll stop there and then continue in conversation.
Thank you, Dom. María Jose.
Hello, my name is María Jose. I am a Puerto Rican trans inter multidisciplinary artist. In true Gemini fashion, I think I can, you know, do all sorts of things. And I started performing. I then started writing poetry, then photography. And all in all, I feel like it's always been a seeking of love. I think I've always been very concerned with love. How do we love other people? How do we love ourselves? Do we love our family members, our biological family members and our chosen family members? And just like a pretty multimedia exploration of interpersonal relationships and what it means for me to relate to other people and to be on this island as a trans woman. And here are like a collection of images where, you know, my daughter and my father, two people kissing in the crossing of a river in a road, and me kind of in nature in front of this humongous waterfall, showing myself, showing my body kind of in sync with nature. And I think I am currently mostly concerned with, or concentrated on, creating moments of joy and relaxation for my trans siblings, for us to kind of like get out of that context of violence that is inescapable.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, welcome. Now you can see us bigger now.
Yay.
Yay. So I, you know, rather than trying to like recontextualize or redo the questions in my head, I decided I'm going to read to you what I sent the artists a couple of nights ago, what I wanted them to think about when we were going to go into this conversation. There's a series of 3 questions, but I think we have so much to talk about, maybe even with just one. But I'm going to read the intro and the first question to start. So, representation is an intersection of body, mind, and culture. I'm interested in how culture and individuals represent themselves and to others, and how cultures appropriate language and literatures, and how language can construct personhood to explore the intersection of biography, nationhood, and spirituality, but also historicize and contextualize the human body, considering health, disability, gender, sexuality, race, and other identity categories. So the first question was, self-representation is often discussed in popular media in polarizing terms as either an empowering practice or mundane. Think of Instagram. However, the political and the quotidian are interwoven, at least for me it is. It is within the context of these everyday self-representational practices that political themes indirectly become embedded, that express self-worth, celebrate marginalized identities, or proclaim personal agency. So the question to all of you was, can you elaborate on how you see the political and the mundane or the quotidian expressed in your practices, and how it can or does upend dominant hierarchies of visibility? Anybody want to dig in?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, can you just elaborate how you see the political expressed in your body of work through this self-representation and through this idea of it being like the everyday? There's something like in your practice, María Jose, that this is your everyday. This isn't, just, but there's something political in that act that you're doing. So I'm wanting to know how you feel like in that expression, how it upends like these dominant hierarchies of visibility.
Well, I feel like in my photographic practice, it being a field that is largely dominated by white cis men, and then there's a small percentage of white cis women, and as you kind of continue going through marginalized intersections, the percentage grows ever smaller. And I am a trans woman with a camera, and I think in that sense, I'm already upending hegemonic ways of representing others, because cameras have not been in the hands of girls like me before. And I think it's really important then to leave a legacy of images, in Puerto Rican visual culture, of these representations of a trans girl and her father and her mother and her friends. And even in yesterday's live, where I invited this 12-year-old non-binary kid, makeup artist, I feel like bringing children into the process also upends kind of hegemonic ways of making art. And I don't think, it's kind of beautiful to embrace that the smallest things and just the everyday is actually really important to document.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that a little bit, I think that just our existence and the existence of the work that we make is already a sort of political statement in and of itself. It's already a pushback for the systems that exist and have tried to suppress us for forever, and our voices. So yeah, I in my own work, I'm very conscious of that, of the fact that like my work, when it enters a gallery, is already a sort of declaration of or or just a declaration in and of itself, right? A declaration of people that look like me, and for people that look like me to be able to enter into a space that isn't normally welcoming for them, but to feel welcome because work like this can exist in these spaces. I don't know if I made any sense just now. I'm feeling confused by what I just said myself. But yeah, I think that I'm very conscious and aware of the fact that, like, so I also teach, and something that I think about a lot is the way that I dress when I go to teach, because there's a very there's an expectation of what a professor or an adjunct faculty looks like when they go and teach. And so I'm very conscious and aware that when I walk into the room, people don't recognize me as being the person that is going to be giving the instruction for that day. And I think about those kinds of things with my work as well, with the way that I carry myself as an artist, with the way that I dress as an artist, like the expectations of what an artist is supposed to look like, what the expectations for an artist is what the expectations of what an artist is supposed to dress like. All of these things are things that I'm very conscious and aware of. And I make a very concerted effort to sort of not have like a peculiar style, to be like as plain Jane as I possibly can, so that people that grew up in the area that I grew up in, people in Southern California, you know, that generally wear like plain t-shirts with jeans and like some sneakers, you know, nothing elaborate, can be able to identify themselves in these spaces and see themselves in these kinds of spaces, see themselves as potentially as an instructor, see themselves as an artist within these institutions that we hold up so highly. So within my work, like, these are definitely things that I'm thinking about all the time. And yeah, wanting to push back what the status quo is, change what the status quo is, and or really have there be no status quo. Like, all should be welcome and nothing should be expected. Like, I hate the idea that there's an expectation of the kind of work that I'm supposed to make, and what I'm supposed to look like when I make that work.
Even this day, like even now, like we're still dealing with these kinds of expectations of what people should or shouldn't be. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about the everyday, because the everyday is incredibly powerful when trying to reach people beyond your own group. I know you have something to say, Dom.
I don't know. Do I
Yes,
have something to say? You know, it took me a very long time to even accept the fact that what I do is political. Because I didn't understand it to be political, right? So then at some point, even with the question of like how would I like frame what I'm doing as political, I see it as like the process itself, you know, for me as an individual becomes the political expression, right? The process to say enough, you know, through the tears and the pain and fighting conditioning that was like imposed on you your entire life. And which is weird because visibility is not my sandbox of like comfort zone when it comes to express what I need to express. And like, you know, so the daily for me is not about being seen. It's more like, you know, for me, it's like, you know, how I'm viewed in the space of like, you know, see me that I exist. Like my existence is so important. The respect is so important. And understanding that the beginning of my practice really started focusing on existence, my existence first and foremost, because my earlier practice really focused on like being of service to others, to sort of like, you know, build spaces, create spaces for someone else, almost like this invisible hand, basically. And going into art, I made a decision that I'm gonna kind of focus on myself, which was pretty major at the time, which is not something that, like, you know, I wasn't raised to be that way, nor was my practice like that. But then to say, like, no, I want to focus on myself, to later realize, like, you know, it goes into a place leading to race, to circle back around into my existence, to layer in aspects and fold issues about investigating my body, because all of it is sort of encompassing, analyzing and thinking about years of being degraded, defeminized, de-eroticized, and to say, like, you know, but why? Why is this the case? You know, because you're constantly comparing yourself in so many ways. You're comparing your practice, you're comparing your education, you're comparing like whether or not like you're intelligent, because these are things that you've been hearing for so long that like you're never enough, you're never enough. And then in some moment in the conditioning, you get comfortable in believing these things. You get so comfortable in that space of negativity because you don't want to be a burden. And you're like, all right, let me just back away and just like stay invisible in the shadows. Nobody needs to see me. Like I was the kid who was always put in the back of the class. Like in the beginning, I would like, you know, I'm first there, I sit in the front because I'm thinking, oh, I'm sitting in the front. And immediately, because I was the tallest and biggest, they're like, so I don't even let them tell me that anymore. For years after that, all through college, I walk through that door, even if I'm the first one, I will go all the way in the back. And I kind of do it too when I'm like out and about in like, you know, art spaces. The only time you'll see me like, you know, giddy is if I'm around certain people. I become alive. I start to exist because those people I trust. But now thinking about those aspects of your body and presence, your mind, your intelligence, all these things as an apparatus to develop that into art, to talk about like, you know, but why? Why am I all of a sudden thinking about this? Because there is a moment where you have to think about it and say like, you're questioning things. This is part of the investigation, right? But then I'm a born fighter. Like, let's be real. Like, you know, I'm Haitian. I'm a fighter. And part of the fighting is like the fucking existence of like, you know, I'm here. Or like the fact that I'm here is proof of something. So now I have to like go into that healing space of me existing and creating work. It's such a mind twisted space to be in, and it literally drains you. But there are moments of clarity, but that takes some time. I'm not gonna lie to you, where I'm like, this was a good thing to go through. I needed to fall. I needed to like hit rock bottom constantly and get back up. I needed to cry in the dark and doubt myself, but then to learn over time to look in the mirror and not cry anymore when I look in the mirror, because I'm not hearing the voices that kept telling me, you don't belong here, you don't belong here, you don't belong here, to a point where you're exercising the don't belong here and you start to work on yourself to make yourself invisible. You are acting on it. Like my body, how I move, everything, like I slump a lot. That's because I curl on myself a lot. And that curling is part of the invisibility that I don't want to be seen, even if no one is around. So my body has been shaped through trauma. And I'm trying to like reshape all of that simultaneously in my 40s. So yeah.
And of course that is political, you know, like healing. Your practice is healing, and like what does it mean for Black women to heal, for trans and non-binary people to heal? And that really is enough, and it is an upending of the way things are, because as you say, like we are forced into these patterns and cycles of removing ourselves, of marginalizing ourselves to the point that we're doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
I still like run away from things constantly. And, you know, I'm just really, first of all, really happy to hear you talk and for you to be here. And for all of us to be here,
Yeah,
standing
for sure.
strong in our power, in our legitimacy, which is given to us by us. And yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it is about, it is about healing, and it's about empowerment. But also, I was thinking too, as you were talking, Dom, how and then thinking about representation, and when we ask you to be in the show, and you were like, "But why? Why do you want me to be in the Trienal show?" This idea that you could be representative of this not identity, but this group. You even like questioned that. And then I also started to think too, María Jose, on a dinner that you came of mine. This was like 4, and you talked about feeling empowered when you were walking down the street with your girls, with your friends, and that gave you a sense of validation that you were not getting from the outside world. And then with you, Luis, I keep on calling you Luis. Es Luis, señores, stop. Luis is, one of the things that I absolutely love, and it's something that there's not a lot of artists addressing masculinity the way you are, and trying to debunk those things that also are very harming. Even the idea of like crocheting, like why can't a man crochet, or why can't a man be this? So it's this everyday man, but it's this everyday man that's also trying to come out of those confines of what it means to be masculine, because it really doesn't serve us either. So thank you so much for all these like amazing answers. So now I'm going to read the second question. Visual representation of people of color is never powerful enough on its own to challenge the socially defined norms that frame them. I mean, like, as you know, just seeing your body is not enough. There's like other things that need to be attached to that. We surely desire to distance ourselves from universal truths, in quotes, and generalizations in visual representation, and wish to read and see the world through the images that each of our cultures produce, and to express our own reality, but expand it beyond what is dominant. So with this in mind, I started, I actually been reading this book, which I just discovered, by this Portuguese sociologist called Sosua Santos. It's Bonaventura or something is his first name. And the book is called The End of Cognitive Empire, The Coming of Age of Epistemologies of the South. And there's a quote that really, really stuck with me, and I'm going to read it to you. To be international is not to be universal. And to be universal is not necessary to be in the center of the world. It can even be universal, yet be confined to its own language, that is, without being translated. It is not about going back to the existing reality of the world, but to think of it from what and who we are, enriching it universally with our ideas and accepting it to be. So with what I just said in mind, so here's the question. How do your works and those of others, if you want to expand on that a little bit, if you wish to give back to the reality of the world, or flip it, right? Or expand it. And to quote the author again, Sosua Santos, again, create epistemologies or histories in solidarity with those who want to change the world as it is known.
One more time.
I think Luis is going to talk, so go ahead, Luis.
It's escaped me. Well, I mean, like, yeah, no, just read it one more time. Read it one more time.
You want me to read the whole thing, or just the quote?
Just the question. Just the question.
Okay, so someone blurted out quote. Did someone say the quote too? No. Okay. How does your work and those of others, if you wish to talk about it in this way,
right,
give back to the reality of the world, also to expand it, and how, again, to create histories in solidarity with those who want to change the world as it is known. So it's about solidarity within the differences, but it's also, again, how do we, push against what is real to make our own, think about, I think about, when my parents or when people come to the United States, there is an expectation that you have to like kind of conform and mold yourself into what it is to be American, quote unquote. But in reality, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way. And so what this author talks about, or what I've been thinking about, how do we within our own realities really are making efforts to change how people, I mean, you kind of might have answered it a little bit in the first question, but I want to expand on what that reality means to you, and how do you feel that reality expands what's already there? Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a valid answer, but what I'm thinking about is this idea of like the sole artist, like the one artist, the author, the owner. And I think in a way, I'm definitely interested in making the work that I do in community, collaborative, and to really kind of strip away authorship and the value that has on the work. I think within my work in House of Grace, even, I'm known as the matriarch, but in the house, we're actually constantly questioning, what does it mean for me to be mother of the house? When really in a horizontal scheme of things, everyone really should be the mother of the effort to push forward collectively. So I think I'm definitely interested in moving away from kind of claiming authorship over my work, over the people in my images, and making efforts to, be in a way that is not capitalistic, where there is no kind of pyramid and top. So that's where I'm going.
That wasn't irrelevant. That's
Yay. We love being relevant.
Yes, everybody does.
I'll admit this question, I kept going back to it. It's the question I mentioned earlier. Yeah, well, this one was the doozy for me that I was talking about earlier on. I was like, wait, no, is this? No, it's not. Is this? And I kept going back to this question where I kept saying to myself, well, what do you want to say? What do you have to say that is important to you?
That's really
Add to it. Right? And when you have, I can only somewhat talk about from a framing of being Black, where it's like, you enter a space automatically, oh, you're this Black person and now you represent all Black people. No. Pause. I can't represent all Black people. That's impossible, because my goofy self and like awkwardness is very flavorful, but I can't be the representation of all. Like, I have so many people who are Black artists that I respect dearly and love their work. And some of the things that I love about it is the fact that like there's aspects of them that's like imbued in the work that they're doing, which is somewhat obvious but abstract sometimes. But all of that has to be part of the tapestry of like, what this quote is trying to say. And that's what I kept thinking, because it's like, it's all, we need all of these things. We need everyone to sort of like, add to this element. Like, there are going to be people who are not into gumbo and into something else, and that's okay. So it's like these things where there are people like me who wear all Black. I've been like, I don't want to say bullied, but like in many ways, a lot of people question me being Haitian. I remember one time someone asked like, really, you're Haitian? Aren't Haitian people like, kind of like malnourished and thin, you're kind of big. Like, where did that come from? So there's like, you know, these layers to how people perceive you. You become like this, almost like you're navigating propaganda, media propaganda and stereotypes that still are like in circulation and have like morphed in different ways, right? And even when we look at social media, the TikToks and whatever, there's somewhat an effort for everyone, as you're noticing, trying to like, you know, say, hey, I'm me, like see me or whatever. But then it starts to go back to this sort of like, you know, molding effect at the same time, because there's a level of repetition that's happening as well. So seeing things in ways where it's not about the individualized game. I agree with María Jose when they mentioned like, you know, this idea of like, why can't we all be moms or mothers or whatever? But then that's the thing, like, you know, you can't just say like, you know, mother, 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 but you got to see the difference in the mothers and like what makes them shine, what makes who is who, the accents, what they say, the sound. And the aspect of like, you know, these things also isn't always just visual. It could be mental and like, you know, your spirit and how you move, like your energy is going to be different. Just because an energy is more direct versus another one, it doesn't make it a wrong thing. Because that's another thing too. There's this need to sort of like soften things to make it more digestible. But it, like, you need both. You kind of need everything. So especially if you know when you're cooking, the aspects of cooking, like you need sometimes to be aggressive on some meat. And sometimes you don't need to be so aggressive, you know? So I feel like when you look at it, and I use a lot of these daily metaphors to kind of go back to the question in that space of daily, I look at daily things like cooking and like, you know, smelling flowers, not smelling flowers, like how we dress, all these things that are kind of part of the like larger conversation and goes into the finer details that maybe I don't have the language for them, but I could definitely see the relationship to it. Because even though I'm Haitian, I cook a certain way. I've had people say like, oh, no, 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 I know you Haitian, you got that good seasoning in the back of your refrigerator. Can you just hook me up? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I could tell you how I cook and I could feed you, you will be happy. But if you're looking for authentic Haitian, I am Haitian, I will give you food, you will feel good, but that's all I can give you. Are you okay with that? And let that be the existence and add to the tapestry that makes me me as someone who is Black, born in Chicago, raised in Haiti, lives in Newark. And yes, that's how I was seeing it at some point.
So I guess for me, so I think a lot about, you know, I think a lot about how masculinity, the way that it was, and this is in reference to the question, right? Masculinity, the way that it was taught to me and how I was raised to be masculine, this and embody this idea of masculinity, was one where it stripped me and stripped many other men away from their humanity, to a sense, right? It stripped us away from being able to have emotional relationships that allow us to be human. It dehumanizes us in a lot of ways. Masculinity, the way that it exists now, in many ways dehumanizes men and doesn't allow us to experience love, doesn't allow us to experience compassion. And we miss out on a lot of things because of that, right? We miss out on being able to have a relationship with another, like, so as a straight man, right? As a straight man that is pretty bro-y, like is a pretty, like, you know, like people who normally would say like, yeah, like he's a dude, like he's kind of a man's man. But I'm also like more than that, right? I want to be able to experience a relationship with another man and be vulnerable with another man and be able to share my emotions with another man and love another man without any sort of like of that baggage that gets brought up with it, right? Like the homophobic rhetoric that tends to come up around being able to have men being able to have relationships with each other in platonic ways, right? In this very sort of just like, I love you like a brother. I love you like I love you. I love you for the person that you are, and being able to say those things without being afraid to say them. And so for me, my work is very concerned with creating a space that opens up the possibility for men to have that agency to be able to be vulnerable with each other. And so in that way, but a lot of it also comes, so the way that I've dealt with it before was in a very sort of like aggressive, dealing with the aggression, dealing with the sort of negative feelings that I had about that, about my relationship to masculinity. A lot of it has to do with my relationship to my dad, my relationship to my uncles and some of my friends, and making work that sort of was a historical marker for these different moments in my life, to talk about these bigger ideas. And now having 2 kids, it's so different the way that I see them now. Like it's a cliche thing to say, but like having a child changes your perspective in a lot of ways. And so now when I have interactions with my kids, I'm thinking not about like all of the baggage that I carry, but thinking more about creating memories and being able to be the positive influence that they won't have to carry around this baggage that I do, right? So creating new relationships and new ways of being able to interact with them that I didn't necessarily get. So just loving them. Really, that's all it comes down to, like loving them unconditionally in a way where I don't feel inhibited in any sort of way because of who I am, because of how I was raised, because of where I come from. So being able to just love them, hug them, kiss them, cherish them, be tender with them, and then having that translate into the way that I have relationships with other people. The way that I, just yesterday, I met with 2 friends for the first time after COVID. Once COVID first started, it'd been over a year since I'd hung out with them. Exactly. And yeah, and I left feeling. So there's just a lot to unpack here, right? So this whole year, I've been thinking a lot about like the person that I'm going to be post-COVID, right? In a way, it's a chance for a lot of people to reset and reevaluate a lot of things. And in this sort of time, I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to interact with people and sort of creating a new way of just interacting with people, and also pushing away a lot of the negativity that I was sort of used to. And so me entering this little like powwow with 2 other friends, just chatting for the first time, going into it thinking like, all right, it's new me, like I'm gonna get to be this new person and have these vulnerable experiences and be able to say things without feeling the need to censor myself. And then I left. We hung out for 3 hours, and I left, and I left feeling like shit. And I'm just like, damn, it's been a year since I've interacted with people, and the automatic responses to a lot of things, because I've been conditioned to do things a certain way, is like it really sort of like made me take a step back and realize that there is so much more effort that needs to go into new ways of being, right? New ways of operating. And so I'm like, I don't know where I was going with this.
Destroy the binary.
Yeah.
Destroy it. It serves us nothing.
It really doesn't. It serves us
What made
good.
you feel like shit, Luis? That's what I'm concerned with. Like those were your
but I reached out to my friends, you know, and I told them, I was like, hey, you know, if I said anything stupid, you know, or if I offended you guys with some of the shit that I said, like, let me know. And they were like, we all left feeling that way too. Like, did we say stupid shit? Because there's also like a whole bunch of relearning, like learning to socialize post-COVID is fucking hard. It's exhausting. I don't like socializing the way that I used to anymore. And I don't have the social stamina for it anymore either. It's like, fuck, 3 hours was a marathon. Like I could have been there a week, you know, it felt like I was there for a week. And so, yeah, so it was just, it was a lot. But yeah, I'm very much interested in just destroying, as María Jose was saying, destroying this binary, destroying these gender norms, these things that we sort of confine ourselves into and perpetuate, right? A lot of us perpetuate these ideas, intentional or not. Like there's a lot of these ideologies that we tend to perpetuate, and we realizing that you have to make a very concerted effort and like really try. It's not an automatic thing. You can't just like stop being the person that you were and then just become this new person completely overnight. Like there's a lot of working towards the new, working towards change. And so my work, I try to deal with that in my work. I try to sort of create these spaces for men to have vulnerable experiences with each other, and be human.
Wow, guys, that was so good. See, even that, why do I have to say guys? We had even that say, hey guys, for everybody. Allow me just to say, hey.
Hey angels.
Hey angels, hey unicorns, hey whatever. That was wonderful. So we're now going to open it up. We have one question so far and a couple of hand raised. So I'm going to read the first question. This one is from Orquídea Morales. And they say, I'd be interested to hear y'all talk about the cathartic aspects of your work, both the process of creating it and also seeing the completed work. So are there cathartic processes? Do you feel that? I think you guys, I said it again. Hey, angels, I feel like you talked about
angels. I love angels. I think that sometimes I don't really see myself kind of being productive in society. I feel like trans women oftentimes are kind of, really stripped from any function in society. And for me, being an artist, creating, encouraging other trans people to create, and seeing that work completed, I think it gives us a purpose. It gives us a purpose and it gives us, something to align our spirit to. And I feel extremely fulfilled by my art. Like for me, that's where I always rescue my worth after society continuously telling me that I'm not worth shit and that like I'm just gonna die before I'm 35. Like I think that just really focusing on making work gives me a purpose and also makes me feel very fulfilled in ways that nothing else does.
Orquídea wanted all of you to know that y'all gender neutral.
I find that it hits me later. So late, it's not even funny. It does take a while for me to get to that point. Understand that the images that you're seeing in the museum, if you haven't seen them yet, and I'm one of those people, I haven't seen them in person yet, I'll admit. It's one thing to do the work. It's another to, when you get home and you're sitting there and looking at them, and that's a bad idea for me. So I avoid looking at my work immediately. I have a tendency to want to delete everything, be like, oh my God, this is trash. Like I get like, all in my head because I'm looking at my body. I'm like having a conversation with myself. And I know, right? Thank you for the hug, Maria. Like seriously, I'm having this visual conversation with myself. And it's like, oh no, I don't want to hear it. Nope. And I have to close everything, kind of come back to it much later to reevaluate it and not look at it as me. And then sort of like process it differently when I have to talk about it. And then there's the seeing it in person, which there's layers to it sometimes. It takes a moment because every time you're confronting it, at least for me, especially the very figurative work, the ones where it really deals with me and like, you know, it's my body. It does take some time to get to that point. But even that point for me, it's like, it's a weird moment. It'll be little things where I'm like, oh, that's what that is. And the time it takes is me starting off taking, believe it or not, that whole series, while it did start as like, you know, a collage series, it really did start with me taking pictures on my phone, like literally taking selfies and trying to get comfortable looking at myself and slowly progressing to sort of like in a different space. What does it mean to be in different spaces and inhabiting those spaces? My body, my presence, different spaces. What is that? Even though it's me in the camera and playing with this, that, like, you know, relationship of gazing and me gazing back at myself, whoever's gonna gaze at me later on, what those thoughts are, quiet them to be able to do that work. And as time goes on, you're doing it without even realizing you're going through it. It's like this weird therapy thing where you're literally, the reason why you're going up a notch is because you're slowly healing yourself. So there's this moment where you're sitting down and the way you talk, how you express yourself, how you hold your body, you know, the fact that you could smile at things certain times is when you like, oh, that's what that is. It's the work. It's that process that got you here. But it does take time, at least for me. It's taken years. I'm not gonna lie to you, years. And I still have so much more work to do. I'm not gonna lie to you, so much more work. I just had the pleasure of working with two amazing people where I needed to be vulnerable in front of them. These are people I know, mind you, just the three of us running around in a museum, and I know them. To make myself vulnerable in front of them to do this work was such a challenge for me, because now I'm like, I'm not rebooting, but it was like, oh, this is a new level for me. And now I have to work towards that to get to that place. So it does take a moment. It takes time.
Luis, you have anything you want to add to that, or are you good?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cathartic for me. It's very therapeutic. It changes a lot. My work is very. It takes. I like to think a lot about the work before I make it. I'm not so much process heavy. I don't. I'm not in the studio like actually making all the time. I spend a lot of time thinking about the work that I'm interested in and want to make. But as I make the work, especially if I'm making the figures, it's a very slow process for the most part, right? Crocheting isn't fast, so to speak. But so as I'm making the work, I'm thinking a lot about what it is, what it's about, what is it, my relationship to it, you know, trying to look at it from different perspectives. And yeah, so it is therapeutic in that way. And a lot of it is like dealing with a lot of baggage. And so, but it changes, right? When the work is complete, I look at it another way, you know, like Dom was saying, like it changes a lot. And then like years later, I'll look at it again, and my relationship to that will change as well. Sometimes it's therapeutic, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not. So yeah, it is very cathartic, but it's one that's it's fluid in terms of to what degree and how it's functioning.
So I got another question through my text through our other curator, Susanna Temkin. And her question is, can the artist speak about the role of narrative in their work? Each artist seems to create tableau or create scenarios that are suggestive of a story, yet we can't quite pin down what is happening. Does this open-endedness relate to how they think about representation in some way? Do you want me to reread the question?
Well, I feel like as far as my work, it's autobiographical, so it's that narrative of like the life that I'm living and literally documenting that. But there's also, there is a surreal aspect to it. There is a fantasy as well. So in that way, the narrative is not necessarily linear. It's not necessarily clear. And I feel like in the ways that I build narrative in my work, it's kind of weaving both autobiographical and fantasy elements at the same time. But in the end, it really is the story of my life.
Yeah, for me, it's similar in that the work is about it's about me and my relationship to people. You don't necessarily get that in the work. It's intended to not be didactic in that way. There is an open-endedness there that I want people to have, for them to be able to what's the word that I'm looking for? I want them to be able to I want the work to resonate with them, and I want them to be able to have a relationship with the work where they can insert themselves into the situations that my figures tend to be placed in. And so that in that, hoping that they'll expand on the conversation and be able to have the conversation that I'm hoping that they'll have, or not even hoping, right? There's a lot of ways of sort of entering my work, I think. Depending on your background and where you come from, you're gonna see the work a certain way. And so, but I do want my work, for the most part, for people to be able to have some sort of relationship to just questioning social norms, and kind of what's happening in the world. Yeah.
Tom, you want to add a little bit of that, or if not, we'll go to the next question. That's gonna be our last question.
Yeah, like, I love abstract narratives, because part of it is, I guess, like, both of you kind of like said it as well. It's really about like, yeah, I start with myself, but then I'm inviting people to sort of like analyze and even kind of like think about themselves in that space too, in a way where it's like, if you feel a connection with me, what is the connection? Even though we're not having that conversation, like, in person, but in your mind, are you questioning the connection that you have with me when you see the work? If you feel upset or annoyed by it, you should question why you're upset and annoyed about it. If you feel like I feel nothing, you should also question why you feel nothing. And part of the abstract narrative that I try to create with my work is really to like invite people to stop and slow down, to really analyze these things, to sort of like position themselves in comparison, not in comparison, but in relationship with another. But then also to learn to kind of like pay attention to another, period. Learn to stop and listen to someone. Learn to pay attention to someone's facial sort of like, gestures, even if they're speaking a different language. Through their expression, you could tell whether they're happy, if they're concerned, if they're worried, if they need help or whatever. And these little things, I try to incorporate them in a way, because part of it is really, how can we learn to relate to one another in different ways? because right now our society is making us move very fast in a very microwave way, like very social media, fast, fast, fast. But then I'm asking people to slow down and really think about bonding and relationship with strangers and people that we know, especially. So that's the space of that narrative, to kind of like even think about your life too when you're looking at me. How do you think about your life in that space? It's not a comparison game, but it's more like a one-to-one action, basically.
So someone has a raised hand, and that's going to probably be our final question. So why Merkel? I'm going to allow you to talk, so hope you're still there. Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
I'm here. I want to say thank you to all the panelists. You guys have done a great job, and I admire your work from what I've heard. And I give you a lot of credit. I am a high school teacher. So from what Dom was saying, stopping and listening and studying body language, and also Luis, trying to reconnect and learn how to communicate with people in this post-COVID era. I mean, as a high school teacher, I'm just like in awe. Like, how can I reconnect with those kids who I haven't seen for over a year and a half? And how can I help them? Because, I know that they're vulnerable. I know that there's so much going on in high school, all the changes that you're going through. And sometimes getting to know and learn about your own body is also so different. So if you can give me some pointers on how to help and be someone that they could trust and that adult that they could come to and confide in if they need help. Because we see so much that, like Dominic was saying, we don't see that kid in the back because they're the tall kid or they're doing the right thing. So they go under the radar, but they might be going through a lot of struggles that we don't catch on to because they're not the trouble child or the kid who doesn't do the work. They just go with the flow and are kind of like in that medium. So thank you.
I'll say that, okay, how do I put this? In my class, it's so important for me for the students to be comfortable. Now, I have taught different, human beings, from itty bitties to high school, college, people with disability, older. My important thing for them is that relationship and having that conversation. It's so slow. And you do have with high school, you have longer period. For college, you have about 4 months. 4 months to establish a relationship with a group of human beings, different backgrounds, all these different things. It's a lot of work. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're gonna open that door, you're gonna open that door and you're gonna be drained, but you gotta know that you're willing to do this. And part of that is really investing to get to know them. Start off slow. And literally, I'll ask them things like, what's your favorite song? What are you guys listening to right now? What are y'all listening to right now? I let them teach me. This semester, my students had such a, this had been the first time that I had so many trans students and non-binary students in my classes. And they had such a treat, not only to teach me, but to feel comfortable. By the end of the semester, the students were opening up and telling me all sorts of things. I said by the end, halfway into the semester, my classroom became almost like a group therapy session, because I'll start off saying so how's everybody doing today? I'm like, are y'all tired like me? I said, I'm so sleepy. I have not slept in days. I said, I just got rejected for blah, blah, blah today. Let me explain something to you. I'll tell them things and it becomes this exchange. Because what it is, it's not about me here, you there. It's no, we're human. Let's talk about this. We're all going through this scary moment together. And then I try to tell them, I try to appease them. I'm like, don't give up. I'm like, hang in there. They could tell on my face, I really am concerned. I'll tell them like, did y'all eat today? What did you eat today? Like, seriously, did you eat your Wheaties today? Why is no one speaking to me? And I'll joke around with them. I'll say like, María Jose, why am I not getting love today? I'm like, do you not love me anymore? Like literally, like I'll do things like that to get them into the space. And then I'll like literally like throw them off and be like, so what's your favorite sandwich? What do you put in your sandwich? And they're looking at me like, And I try to connect it with what we're doing. And all of that is to establish relationship, for me to learn more about them. And as they're telling me things, I use that to kind of like have fun with them sometimes. And they get comfortable telling me, I can't come to class today. I'm having an anxiety attack. And to tell them, go see the right people, go see someone. I know you don't want to go see the school therapist, but it's important to see someone, talk to someone else. Take the time you need to rest, and being in that space of understanding too. So I try so much to kind of like not force a relationship, but to make them see me just as much as a human being going through some of the same thing. Because in their mind, they're thinking you're not going through stuff and you can't relate. And I'm letting them know, not only can I relate with you, I'm willing to listen to you and I'm willing to learn from what you have to tell me. And to be open to that. And when they tell me, do you know blah, blah, blah? I'm like, no, I don't. What is it? Tell me about it. And they all start telling me things. And they're happy to finally express themselves, to be seen. So those are the things that I try to do.
So I don't know if María Jose and Luis have anything to add, or if
something very similar, like just like a casual check-in, at least for me and House of Grace, like for us, it's really important to check in, to even dedicate like a 2-hour like meeting just to speak about our feelings. And also a check-in can be as simple as like, say a color, the first color that comes into your mind, So opening up that space for checking in, I think is essential, especially now that we're kind of dealing with so much.
All right, Luis.
I mean, it's just reiterating the same thing. You got to be vulnerable with them if you want them to be vulnerable with you. Yeah, and just being genuinely interested in your students. If you're not genuinely interested, they're gonna see right through it, and yeah, they're not gonna talk to you. So be interested in them. Let them know that you're there for them. That you really are there for them. So, yeah, reiterating the same.
Bueno, Luis, María Jose, and Dom, thank you, thank you, thank you. Gracias, gracias, gracias. This was wonderful. Thank you for opening up to us and being your true, authentic self. And that was just for me, a really great conversation. And I'm sure it was for others. Just want to remind everyone that we are the second, we're talk on the next Trienal Talks is going to be on June 23rd with Eddie Aparicio, Yanira Collado, Manuela Gonzalez, and the topic is going to be form, and it will be moderated by Rodrigo Mura. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye, angels. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Adios, corazones.
Adios. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.